Diners feast on appealing, refined plates as they overlook the crashing water of St. Anthony Falls Dam. This Minneapolis restaurant is one of the hottest seats in town, and it's also groundbreaking.
Owamni in Dakota language basically means the place of the falling, swirling water. And for the Dakota people, because there was a village on this side of the river for a long, long time, because this was a place for portaging, for meeting, for gathering, and for all sorts of things. It's a really important spot.
Lakota chef Sean Sherman and business partner Dana Thompson opened Owamni in 2021 on Dakota land with cooperation of the Minneapolis Park Board. Last year, it won Best New Restaurant in America by the prestigious James Beard Foundation.
The food itself is really simple. We just use very simple ingredients. We just tried to utilize indigenous ingredients. We cut out colonial things, so there's no dairy, wheat flour, cane sugar, beef, pork, chicken. Things that didn't exist here, we took away.
The plates are artful, steeped in local and regional ingredients, yet infused with meaning. From the bison tacos, venison tartare with squash puree, an elk sandwich, and smoked whitefish. The message is not only about survival and sustenance, but of reclamation.
We weren't trying to cook like the past. We're not trying to be a museum and say this is a meal from the 1800s. You know, we're trying to say this is the food of the future.
Sherman grew up on the Lakota Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. He ate government-issued canned food and fry bread. By 14, he says he found his way into kitchens and never left.
A few years into my chef career, I realized the absence of indigenous foods anywhere, including in my own knowledge.
That set him on a path to learning about the food of his Lakota ancestors before European colonization. He and Thompson launched the Sioux Chef business in 2014. A food truck, cookbook, a nonprofit and food lab, and now a nationally lauded restaurant later. The message is resonating.
I wouldn't say that he was the first, because we've had other indigenous chefs, but I think Sean has done a lot to help to elevate the movement in terms of bringing visibility, telling a story.
Cornelius is an Oneida Nation farmer and is involved with the indigenous food movement. He says Owamni makes a point to source food from indigenous producers, like himself and the Red Cliff Fish Company in Bayfield, Wisconsin.
Sean is at the forefront of really helping to not only direct sales to producers with the restaurant, with natives, but it's building a level of demand that ultimately is good for our producers. The challenge, though, is we just need more product.
Chef Sherman has been taking his message on the road, from Australia, Hawaii, and even here at Moorhead State University.
No matter where we are in North America, we are standing on indigenous land, and North America's history begins with indigenous history first.
Indigenous and non-Indigenous folks crowded into a room on campus to get a chance to hear from one of the culinary world's latest stars. What they got was a history lesson.
The Northwest Ordinance basically builds the framework and justifies this very young country what they need to do to basically murder and remove indigenous peoples and steal their land spaces. They would gather these militias, especially in the western states where they're mostly still territories, and they would just promise that if you join up, we'll take out this community and you can take whatever you want home with you. So it's just so much violence is all I'm trying to get to, and you can read many, many more instances of that.
And in 2023, this northern Minnesota audience was open.
I thought it was fantastic. I came expecting mostly it'd be specifically on recipes and food, but I learned how the history of indigenous food was essentially taken away, and it's how interesting how Sean is bringing it back.
Sherman says talking to students is important. For some, it may be the first non-Euro-centered history lesson they hear.
I know that I go through some dark history, but I think it's really important to go through that. And I know there's emotions that come up with some of the stories that I tell. But again, that's important because we're humans and we have to experience this humanity, both good and bad, and we have to remember some of the trauma that some of us have been put through and to try to think about solutions to hopefully not let that happen again.
Afterwards, Sherman and his crew served up fresh local indigenous food for $11.
We have some grain mix on the bottom, so Potawatomi corn. We have some tepary beans from the Southwest, some wild rice from Red Lake, some roasted veggies, some duck, some wojapi, which is the berry sauce, and some fresh greens. Really simple.
Maria Ostos did not know who Sherman was. She came at the urging of her son. Sherman's message reminded her of her Indigenous Mexican grandmother.
I appreciated the history lessons. I appreciated the bravery on speaking the truths of the history lessons. And I am inspired by what he can accomplish for the future.